Sterile Millionaire finds twins crying at his wife's grave and turns pale upon hearing their story. Before we dive in, drop a comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? Subscribe and turn on notification to see more videos like this. From sleeping in his car to commanding boardrooms, David had clawed his way from poverty to prosperity. His tech company revolutionized data security, transforming him from a nobody into a millionaire before his 35th birthday. Money flowed like water, yet the one thing he desperately wanted remained beyond his reach. Sarah had stood by him through every struggle, every sleepless night spent coding in their tiny apartment. She believed in him when banks wouldn't, when investors laughed, when failure seemed certain. Together, they built an empire. Together, they planned a family that would never come. The medical consultations became a ritual of heartbreak. Specialist after specialist delivered the same crushing verdict. David was completely sterile. Sarah's own complications from previous treatment sealed their fate. The doctors spoke in clinical terms about impossibilities and alternatives, but their words felt like prison sentences. While David buried his pain in corporate expansion and 18-hour workdays, Sarah refused to surrender hope. She had been an elementary school teacher before marriage, and children remained her passion. Every fiber of her being ached for little voices calling her mama, tiny hands reaching for bedtime hugs, small feet running through their home. Their mansion stood as a monument to broken dreams. David had designed it with children in mind, wide hallways perfect for running, a backyard playground that remained pristine and unused. The nursery hurt most of all. Sarah had painted it herself, choosing soft yellow walls that would suit any child. Cribs sat empty, mobile toys hung motionless, and stuffed animals waited for arms that would never hold them. Sarah often stood in that doorway, her hand resting on her flat stomach, whispering to the children who lived only in her imagination. David would find her there some evenings, tears streaming down her face as she spoke to the silence. But Sarah possessed something money couldn't buy and medical science couldn't measure, unshakable faith in love's power to create families. She looked at David one evening and spoke words that would change everything. Family isn't just blood, it's choice. Someone, somewhere, needs us as much as we need them. Sarah's words about choosing family weren't just hope, they became her mission. While David drowned himself in business meetings and international deals, Sarah began volunteering at local shelters and group homes. She told David she needed purpose beyond their empty mansion, but her real motivation ran deeper. 3 months before tragedy would strike, Sarah walked into Sunrise Group Home and her world shifted forever. Among the dozen children living there were 2 who captured her heart instantly, Sam and Grace, twin siblings aged 8, who had been forgotten by a system overwhelmed with cases. Sam was the protector, serious beyond his years, always positioning himself between his sister and potential threats. His dark eyes held wisdom that no child should possess, earned through years of disappointment. Grace was gentler, quieter, but her artistic soul shone through every drawing she created, pictures of families holding hands, houses with picket fences, and dreams she dared not speak aloud. Their story broke Sarah's heart. Born to teenage parents who vanished when responsibility became real, the twins had bounced between relatives who saw them as burdens rather than blessings. Each placement ended with more rejection, more reasons to believe they were unwanted. Sarah began visiting every weekend, driving 3 hours each way to spend time with children she couldn't yet call her own. She told David she was helping with general volunteer work, never mentioning the specific faces that had claimed her heart. The deception felt necessary. She wanted this to be the greatest surprise of their marriage. During those secret Saturdays, Sarah discovered Grace's passion for painting. She brought art supplies, watching the little girl's face light up as she created masterpieces with small, careful hands. Sam remained guarded at first, but Sarah's patience slowly melted his defenses. She brought books about technology and science, subjects that sparked his curious mind. The breakthrough came during their 5th visit. Grace shyly showed Sarah a drawing of 4 stick figures standing in front of a large house. "That's you, me, Sam, and your husband," she whispered. "When we become a real family." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she realized these children already loved her, and David, whom they'd never met but trusted through her stories. She began adoption proceedings immediately, working with lawyers and social workers to navigate the complex process. Everything had to be perfect for her grand reveal. She planned to complete the adoption while David traveled to Asia for business, 3 weeks that would give her time to bring the children home and create the family surprise he never saw coming. The house preparations began, redecorating rooms, buying clothes, and imagining his face when he'd discover their prayers had been answered. Comment Sarah if her secret broke your heart too. Sarah's secret adoption plan required careful timing and perfect execution. The paperwork alone took weeks to complete, background checks, financial statements, home inspections, all done while David remained focused on his business empire. Sarah used her volunteer connections and substantial donations to expedite the process through proper channels. The final adoption signatures were scheduled for the exact week David would be in Asia, finalizing a merger that would expand his company globally. Sarah smiled to herself as she calculated the timing. He would return to find their empty mansion transformed into a home filled with laughter and love. Those final weeks became a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah quietly converted the guest rooms into perfect children's spaces. She bought twin beds with matching colorful quilts, filled bookshelves with stories and educational materials, and created art stations where Grace could paint her dreams into reality. For Sam, she assembled a computer setup where his analytical mind could explore technology. At the group home, the twins began packing their few belongings with nervous excitement. Sam remained protective of his hopes, warning Grace not to expect too much. But Grace's artistic spirit couldn't be contained. Her drawings evolved beyond generic family scenes. Now she sketched specific details Sarah had shared about their future home. The most precious drawing showed a tall man with kind eyes standing next to Sarah in front of a large house. Grace had labeled it Daddy David in her careful child's handwriting. When Sarah saw it during her final visit, tears streamed down her face. These children already loved a man they'd never met, trusting in Sarah's descriptions of his gentle heart beneath his business exterior. Sam finally allowed himself to believe when Sarah showed them photos of their new rooms. His stoic mask cracked as he realized someone had actually created a space just for him, filled with things he loved rather than hand-me-downs from previous children. The pickup was scheduled for Saturday morning. Sarah planned to spend the weekend helping them settle in before David's Sunday night return. Everything was arranged, every detail planned, every heart ready for the reunion that would heal 3 broken souls. Saturday morning arrived with deceptive beauty. Sarah woke before dawn, her heart racing with anticipation. Today was the day she would finally bring Sam and Grace home. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes the children would remember from this moment that would change their lives forever. The drive to Sunrise Group home would take 3 hours through winding country roads. Sarah had made this journey dozens of times, but today felt different. She hummed softly, rehearsing the words she would say to David when he returned tomorrow night to find their family complete. 20 minutes from her destination, Sarah stopped at a red light in a small town she'd passed through countless times. She checked her phone one last time, a text from David in Singapore, saying he missed her and couldn't wait to come home. She smiled, typing back a cryptic message about having the biggest surprise of their marriage waiting for him. The light turned green. Sarah pressed the accelerator and entered the intersection she'd crossed safely so many times before. She never saw the drunk driver racing through his red light at 60 miles per hour. The impact was instantaneous, devastating, final. David received the phone call in a Singapore boardroom, surrounded by executives finalizing the biggest deal of his career. The words seemed to come from another dimension: fatal accident, pronounced dead at the scene, so sorry for your loss. His empire meant nothing as his world collapsed in that sterile conference room. The flight home lasted 18 hours, each minute stretching like eternity. David stumbled through funeral arrangements in a grief-stricken haze, making decisions about flowers and caskets while his heart shattered with every breath. 3 days after burying his wife, David discovered her laptop still open to emails from the adoption agency. Photos of 2 children smiled back at him. Her journal revealed everything. Months of secret visits, adoption paperwork, room preparations, and most heartbreaking of all, her excitement about surprising him. The agency called, asking about the pickup that never happened. Through tears and rage, David made the decision that would haunt him: find them another home. I can't. I just can't. He couldn't face children who represented both his greatest dream and deepest loss. In his brokenness, he abandoned the very gift Sarah had died trying to give him. Saturday came and went without Sarah's arrival. Sam and Grace sat by the window with their packed bags, watching every car that approached Sunrise Group home. Hours turned to days, days to weeks, and still no explanation came from the adults who managed their lives with clinical detachment. The social workers offered hollow reassurances wrapped in bureaucratic language. Sometimes plans change, they said, avoiding the children's desperate eyes. We'll find you another placement. But Sam and Grace didn't want another placement. They wanted the woman who had promised them a family, who had looked at Grace's drawings with tears of joy, who had made Sam believe in hope again. Months passed without answers. The twins developed their own theories, each more heartbreaking than the last. Grace wondered if her drawings weren't good enough, if she had somehow disappointed the kind woman who brought art supplies every Saturday. Sam blamed himself for being too guarded, too slow to trust, convincing himself that his protective walls had driven Sarah away. Meanwhile, David transformed from a successful businessman into a ghost haunting his own mansion. He cancelled meetings, ignored phone calls, and ran his empire through emails sent at 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. The house became his prison. Every room Sarah had prepared for the children stood exactly as she'd left it. The twin beds remained perfectly made with their colorful quilts. Art supply sat untouched on Grace's future desk. Sam's computer setup gathered dust, waiting for curious hands that would never come. David couldn't bear to change anything, yet couldn't stand looking at the evidence of dreams that died with his wife. Food spoiled in his refrigerator. Mail piled up unopened. The playground in his backyard became overgrown with weeds, its swings moving only with the wind. David existed rather than lived, going through motions while his heart remained buried 6 feet underground. As the twins approached their 10th birthday, Sam's protective instincts evolved into determination. He began asking careful questions about Sarah, her full name, where she lived, details the social workers had forgotten he'd overheard. Grace contributed fragments she remembered, Sarah's stories about her husband's business success, the big house with the yellow nursery, the husband who traveled to far countries. Late at night, when the other children slept, Sam pieced together clues like a detective solving a cold case. He remembered Sarah mentioning specific streets, landmarks, even the cemetery where her parents were buried. Grace's artistic memory provided visual details, the color of Sarah's car, the jewelry she wore, the way she described her neighborhood. By their 10th birthday, they had constructed a roadmap to the truth. The woman who had vanished from their lives had a grave somewhere, and they were determined to find it. The 2nd anniversary of Sarah's death arrived with an unexpected clarity. For the first time in months, David felt compelled to visit her grave in daylight rather than his usual midnight pilgrimages. Something drew him there that morning, a pull he couldn't explain or resist. Meanwhile, across the city, Sam and Grace slipped away from Sunrise Group home during morning recreation time. Their detective work had finally paid off. They'd located the cemetery where Sarah Richardson was buried. Armed with wilted flowers picked from the group home garden and hearts full of desperate hope, they embarked on their mission to find answers. David arrived first, carrying his weekly offering of white roses. The familiar routine of cleaning the headstone and arranging flowers provided the only peace he'd known in 2 years. He knelt on the damp grass, speaking quietly to the marble that held his wife's name, telling her about business deals that felt meaningless and nights that stretched endlessly without her laughter. The sound of footsteps on gravel made him look up. 2 children approached through the morning mist, moving with purpose toward the row of headstones nearby. David's first instinct was irritation. This sacred space belonged to the dead and those who mourned them, not to children playing games. But these children weren't playing. They stopped directly in front of Sarah's grave, just feet from where David knelt. The boy held the girl's hand protectively while she clutched her pitiful bouquet of dying flowers. Both faces bore expressions far too serious for their young ages. David watched in stunned silence as the girl placed her flowers next to his white roses. She whispered something to the headstone that he couldn't hear, then both children stepped back with the reverence of true mourners. When the boy looked up and spoke, his words shattered David's world. "Are you the man our mom promised?" The blood drained from David's face as impossible connections formed in his mind. These children knew Sarah. They called her Mom. They had come to her grave with the devotion of family members, yet he'd never seen them before in his life. Sam stepped closer, his protective instincts overriding his fear. "She told us about you. About the big house and the rooms she made for us. About how you'd love us like she did." David's vision blurred as he truly looked at the children for the first time. Sam had Sarah's determined chin and fierce loyalty in his eyes. Grace possessed the same gentle spirit that had made Sarah approach every child with unconditional love. These weren't random children, they were the family Sarah had died trying to give him. "Type a pale if you predicted this twist." The silence between them stretched like a bridge neither knew how to cross. David stared at the children while his mind raced to process the impossible. These were the faces from Sarah's laptop photos, the children whose rooms still sat perfectly prepared in his empty mansion, the family he had rejected in his darkest hour of grief. Sam's protective mask finally cracked, revealing 2 years of accumulated pain and confusion. His young voice trembled with accusation and hurt. "You left us waiting for 2 years. She promised you would come for us when she couldn't. She said you'd be our daddy, but you never came." The words hit David harder than any business failure ever could. Each syllable carried the weight of broken promises and abandoned hope. Sam continued, his composure dissolving into the raw emotion of a child who had been forced to grow up too fast. "We packed our bags every day for months. Every car that came to the home, we thought it might be you." Grace stepped forward with the quiet courage that had sustained her through years of disappointment. From her small backpack, she pulled out a worn notebook, her diary, filled with drawings and carefully written words. Her tiny hand shook as she opened it to pages covered with stick figure families and houses with hearts drawn around them. "Mom said you'd love us like she did," Grace whispered, showing David a drawing labeled, "Our Forever Family." 4 figures stood hand in front of a large house, Sarah, David, and 2 children who looked remarkably like Sam and Grace. "She said you had a big heart, but it was sad because you couldn't have babies. She said we would make you happy again." David's legs gave out beneath him. He sank to his knees on the cemetery grass, his business suits and boardroom confidence stripped away by the innocence of children who had believed in promises their mom would never live to keep. The white roses scattered around him as his hands covered his face. "I didn't know," he choked out between sobs that had been building for 2 years. "When she died, I found her computer, the photos, the plans. But I was broken. I thought I would fail you like I failed her. I told them to find you another family because I didn't think I deserved to be your father." The cemetery fell silent except for the sound of 3 hearts breaking and healing simultaneously. Sam's anger began to soften as he watched this powerful man crumble with grief and regret. Grace moved closer, her small hand reaching out tentatively to touch David's shoulder with the same gentle spirit Sarah had possessed. "We don't need perfect," Sam said quietly, his voice carrying wisdom beyond his 10 years. "We just need someone who won't leave us again. Mom said you were good at keeping promises." David looked up through his tears at 2 children who somehow still had faith despite being abandoned by every adult they'd ever trusted. In their eyes, he saw not just Sarah's spirit, but a chance at redemption he'd never thought possible. 3 weeks later, David stood in the courthouse with Sam and Grace by his side, their small hands clasped in his as the judge finalized what Sarah had started 2 years earlier. The legal papers that made them officially family felt insignificant compared to the bond forged in that cemetery, a connection built on shared grief, mutual forgiveness, and love that refused to be buried. The drive home revealed the mansion David had preserved as an unintentional shrine to Sarah's dreams. Sam and Grace walked through rooms they'd only imagined, touching furniture Sarah had chosen specifically for them, discovering spaces designed with their personalities in mind. The art station for Grace, the technology corner for Sam, everything exactly as their mom had planned. That first night, David tucked them into beds that had waited empty for too long. Grace's room glowed softly with nightlights Sarah had installed, while Sam's space felt like the sanctuary of a young scholar. As David pulled covers up to their chins, both children stared at him with wonder, still half convinced this might be another dream that would shatter with dawn. "Will you really stay?" Grace whispered, echoing fears born from years of temporary placements and broken promises. David's voice was steady, carrying the weight of a vow he would never break. "This is your home. You belong here, and I'm not going anywhere." The yellow nursery transformed into a family room where evenings were spent with homework, art projects, and stories read beneath Sarah's portrait hanging above the fireplace. Her painted eye seemed to watch over the family she'd fought to create, her smile blessing the love that had finally found its way home. Months passed in a blur of school events, bedtime routines, and the beautiful chaos of family life. Sam's walls continued crumbling as he learned to trust in permanence. Grace's artwork evolved to include new family portraits. 3 figures standing together, always with Sarah's spirit hovering protectively above them. On the first anniversary of their adoption, David returned to the cemetery with fresh flowers and a heart full of gratitude rather than grief. He knelt beside Sarah's headstone one more time, but this visit felt different, triumphant rather than mournful. His whispered words carried across the quiet morning air, "You won, Sarah. You gave us each other, and love found a way home. Thank you for choosing us to be family." The wind rustled through nearby trees as if carrying her laughter, and David smiled, knowing some promises transcend even death itself. The sterile millionaire who once believed his empty mansion reflected his barren future discovered that love operates beyond medical diagnoses and financial statements. David Richardson learned that sometimes the greatest gifts arrive wrapped in the most unexpected packages. 2 grieving children who refused to let go of a promise their chosen mother had made. What began as a routine visit to his wife's grave became the moment that transformed 3 broken lives into one complete family. The twins who had waited 2 years for answers found not just explanations, but a father who would spend the rest of his life making up for lost time. David, who had sentenced himself to a lifetime of loneliness, discovered that Sarah's love had created a bridge across death itself. Their story proves that family isn't defined by genetics or traditional timelines. Sometimes it requires faith to believe in strangers, courage to forgive abandonment, and wisdom to recognize that love can survive even the most devastating losses. Sam and Grace taught David that healing doesn't mean forgetting the past, it means building a future worthy of those we've lost. Today, the mansion that once echoed with emptiness overflows with homework sessions, art projects, and bedtime stories. The playground that gathered weeds for 2 years now hosts Saturday adventures and birthday parties. The yellow nursery, transformed into a family room, witnesses daily proof that dreams deferred aren't always dreams denied. David's business empire continues to thrive, but his greatest success isn't measured in stock prices or profit margins. It's calculated in school plays attended, scraped knees kiss better, and 2 children who sleep peacefully knowing their father will be there when they wake up. Sometimes family finds you in cemeteries, standing over graves that hold more than memories, they hold promises waiting to be fulfilled. Sarah's greatest victory wasn't just creating a family, it was proving that love planted in good soil will always find a way to grow, even through the hardest ground. The sterile millionaire learned that sterile only described his medical condition, never his capacity to love. Subscribe and turn on notification for more stories that prove love always wins.